Hello, all you book burners, and welcome to another episode of Books Are Burning. I'm Mark Will, author, songwriter, and publisher in permanent exile, currently based on the island of Taiwan, and I'm joined once again by G.J. Villa. Welcome back.
Happy to be here.
All right, well, we're continuing with our rereading of James Joyce's Ulysses. We're now on episode 3 of that amazing novel. We did episode 1, Telemachus, a couple of weeks ago. Last week we did episode 2, Nestor. And now episode 3 is called Proteus. And how would you say it's going so far?
Do you mean the overall read, or do you mean Proteus of Proteus?
No. How do you think the rereading is going so
yeah.
far? Like
it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
The rejoicing that we're doing.
It is glorious. Anybody who's read it once and is wondering if they should pick it up again, yes, it is infinitely better the second time around in so many ways. We talked before, for me, it's this uncanny feeling of familiarity and newness, often simultaneously, right? Things that I remember from last time, right, that have been buried in my subconscious almost, right? That phrase or that image, etc. And just understanding how it sort of fits in the entire scheme of both the particular episode and the whole, because then you're thinking the second time around on that kind of larger structural organic level, right? The way that this part here is foreshadowing something later on or echoing something from this other episode, and you just have this amazing feeling of the unity, the organic unity of this beast.
Phrases and images, that's what we see repeating themselves over and over again.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Key phrases, key images. So we're gonna see a lot of those in this episode. Some we've seen before, and some we'll see later in the text.
Definitely.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
All right.
All right. So yeah, this series is called Rejoice. The Houston Joyce Society rereads Ulysses. That's us. We're HJS.
Resurrected from the dead.
Yes. And if you're watching the video, you can see yet another portrait of Joyce by the great Brian Whelan. This one has a blue motif. All right, so again, the text we're using, GJV is using the Random House edition with the double J on the cover. I've got my hardcover Modern Library edition, and so all page numbers that I cite are in this hardcover. As I said, I lost the jacket a long time ago. And then occasionally I consult the Penguin Modern Classics paperback, but no page references to that. Now, our mutual friend, Maria C. in H-Town, I guess honorary member of the Houston Joyce Society, she is thinking about, maybe she's already started reading the text for the first time ever. And so she was asking what the best text is, and she came across this Gobbler edition. I've seen the cover before, but I've never owned a copy of this edition or like seen it in person, but looking at it online seems to be a pretty good one. The great Richard Ellman wrote the preface or foreword. So, I mean, if he's giving it his stamp of approval, must be pretty good. But I've seen online that some people argue the so-called corrections didn't necessarily make the text better in every instance. So there seems to be some controversy about that. Had you heard about it? The Gobbler?
Just in passing, yeah. Yeah,
that cover looks familiar, right? You've seen that.
I have seen the cover, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the important thing is to jump in, for someone like Maria, who's a seasoned, lifelong reader of all kinds of books, right? So she should just jump in and maybe use an accompanying sort of summary guide or something. I don't know how serious she is about it, but, whether you're reading this so-called definitive text or the Random House or whatever, dive in, begin.
I just wonder if, like, we've been reading texts that have multiple errata.
Yeah, I mean, maybe changes to this line or that line or whatever, but for me, I don't think that would impact the experience of the whole.
Fair enough. All right. Well, just a reminder, episode 3 is the third and final part of the Telemachia or Telemachy, which is the first section of the novel, and it focuses on Stephen. Remember, it starts with the letter S. There's a huge S in, most editions, or I guess most of the early editions. That paperback I have doesn't have like an S as big as the entire first page, but I prefer that because
Yeah, that's
I think
my
it's
edition has that.
important. Yeah, I think it's important. My hardcover does too. And as we said, S is for Stephen, son, possibly saint, sullen,
Sinner.
sinner. Yeah, that's good. A good one. Saint, possibly as well. Saint Stephen. All right. So all can be borne in mind. So we're focusing on episode 3, which is called Proteus. And if you're watching the slideshow, you see this picture of the Greek character Proteus. Why is this an appropriate title for this episode?
Well, the Proteus episode or the Proteus encounter in, I think it's book 4 of the Odyssey. Telemachus has departed and left Nestor, right? He traveled to Nestor by land and horse, interestingly enough, right? And horse is one of the key images for chapter 2, right? Or episode 2.
Yes, right.
Well, Telemachus, after he visits Nestor, right, then departs by sea. His first time, basically, departing by sea, goes across the ocean, right? The ocean certainly plays a part in the Proteus episode. Stephen is walking by the ocean. And he goes to meet Menelaus, right? Agamemnon's brother, who had recently fought with Telemachus' father, Odysseus, right? And Menelaus basically talks about the way in which they finally were able to get home. They had sailed home. They were shipwrecked for a while. The winds weren't in their favor. And he meets a nymph who tells him, you and your men basically need to tackle the god over there, one of the minor gods of the sea, Proteus, as he cavorts with his seals, I believe. Pin him down and do not let him escape. And if you hold him down, he will then tell you essentially how to get back home, right? So Menelaus and his men do that, and as they are holding on to the god shapeshifts. He shapeshifts into sea animals, into vegetation, into all kinds of, if I remember correctly, animate and inanimate objects or images, etc. So Proteus is the shapeshifter, right? You have to hold him down to extract the truth from him. And in episode 3, one of the ways to think about Proteus is language itself, which is coursing through Stephen's mind as a sort of shape-shifting phenomenon, right?
And of course, a good way to remember this is to think of the English word protean, which refers to that shape-shifting quality. So you're saying, I think you've read the Odyssey more recently than I have. You're saying that Menelaus does this for Telemachus's benefit?
He's narrating to Telemachus and basically talking about the way in which they got home, right? And this is one of the stories he tells.
Okay.
That they had to tackle the sea god Proteus and hold him down in order to get home. And I think this I may be wrong at, right? But I think that Menelaus says that Proteus tells him about Odysseus. That I'll have to look into that. So anyway, that's the context for the way it comes up in the Odyssey. Menelaus talking to Telemachus, right? Talking about Menelaus's journey home and their encounter with this god in order to get favorable winds and information, basically.
Yeah, I don't know if it's relevant to episode 3, but Menelaus, of course, is the brother of Agamemnon, and It was his wife, Helen, who was abducted by the Trojan Paris, and this was the cause of the war. It was all for a girl.
That's right.
I mean, I think Yeah. Well, as we'll
All
see.
for a girl and all for, I mean, beyond a girl, it's all basically about warrior honor, right? A king can't let his wife be just taken from him, right? And not react.
Hmm.
So it's bound up with ideas about manhood and honor and hierarchy and so on, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, again, we want to look at the Gilbert Lenati schema, and I want to emphasize the Lenati aspect because there are things in the schema that Joyce gave to his friend Lenati that he did not give to Gilbert. So I throw them all together just for the sake of completion. But as we said last time, maybe Joyce gave different schemata to different people to deliberately create confusion. Who knows? But the scene is the Strand. In particular, we're on Sandy Mount Strand. The hour is now 11 a.m. So we're progressing through the day. It's just before noon on June 16th, 1904. As with the other two episodes of the Telemachia, there is no bodily organ. As we mentioned last time, I think Stephen is alienated from his body, or he's disembodied. He's more in his head. So that may be why there's no bodily organ associated with the first three episodes, which, relate to him. Of course, all that changes when Bloom is introduced in episode 4. The art is philology. The color is green, and I think that's in Gilbert. The Lenati schema also mentions blue. So we're both wearing green shirts today, and I've got a touch of blue with the hat here. So that's very appropriate. Symbols, tide. I think that's in Gilbert, but then Lenati also includes word, evolution, metamorphosis. There's that shape shifting. The technique is monologue, male, which contrasts with the female monologue at the end of the novel. So this first section ends with the male monologue provided by Stephen Dedalus, and then at the end of the novel, we'll have the female monologue provided by the Penelope character, Molly Bloom, wife of Leopold. All right, so correspondences, primal matter equals Proteus, Kevin Egan equals Menelaus, cockle picker, of which there are two, equals Megapenthes, although I think the Gilbert lists it as Megapenthus, which is not really accurate if we're looking at the Greek. I think Megapenthes is a son of Menelaus. That's
Yeah,
kind of an obscure one.
I just looked it up, but yeah, he is. It says here the stalwart son of Menelaus and a slave woman, uh, Paris or Teres, and essentially when Telemachus arrives in Sparta, there's a double wedding going on, a double wedding feast, and one of the two pairs getting married is Megapenthes is marrying the daughter of Elector, whoever that is, right? Um, Later, Megapenthes brings a silver mixing bowl to gift to Telemachus, showing his role within the royal household, right? So
Okay.
he appears later. So he is the two cockle pickers, whom we'll talk about at one point, right? I guess those are a kind of faint, ironic, parodic, contemporary echo of
The
uh,
married couple,
the
maybe.
married couple. The fact that Megapenthes was the daughter of a slave. Interesting too, right? So, but anyhow, yeah, you mentioned earlier that there's no organ and that Stephen is
Wait, daughter
disembodied.
or son? Megapenthes is a son, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I thought you said
Oh, did I
daughter.
say? Oh no, he's born from a slave woman.
Right. Okay.
Right. My bad, my dad. But just before we move on, you mentioned Stephen's sort of disembodied state, and nowhere is that more apparent than the third episode, which is the most solipsistic. He's the most sort of trapped in his mind, and we should also add that this is where people who are reading Ulysses for the first time, if they jump ship, this is typically where they jump ship, right? Because it
Yeah.
is upon first glance, a highly frustrating uh, uh, episode, right?
Yeah.
From the very first paragraph. And episodes 1 and 2 have their own challenges, right? But overall, first time reader might be, okay, I kind of can get where this is going. All right, I sort of understand it. This is where people bail out, right? So it is a daunting chapters in a lot of ways. Philology and language in Stephen's mind, right? You're sort of trapped there. Nothing is really happening, right? So, but all that said, right? Once you see the way it fits in the entire scheme, and then there are some moments, of course, as there is always with Joyce, moments of sheer brilliance and mystery in terms of the language being used, right? And the way that it does shift. And we do get deeper insight into Stephen's mind. So, in short, right, for someone like Marie or anyone else, this is where you need to first, like, just say, yeah, this is insane. I'm going to get through it, right? Maybe I'll use some kind of, or just get through it, right? Because episode 4 is a blossoming of warmth and welcoming from Bloom, right? Wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, that's why earlier in the week I said the subtitle of this podcast is How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Proteus episode.
Yeah, that's a very apt characterization for sure.
A testament to its difficulty, but after, wrestling with its protean nature for however many times now, it's more than 5 because even for this 5th reading, I read it at least 2 or 3 times while, making my notes. So I've come to love it. I mean, it's those images and phrases again, and there's some great ones here that, when I reread, they came back to me in all their force and power.
Right. It's a kind of powerful sense of deja vu, isn't it? Right. When you're going back and seeing that again.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive in.
Let's do it. So here's the scene. This is actually a photograph, I think, from Wikipedia of Sandy Mount Strand, which we visited. It does look like that. It's kind of an unusual beach in that the tide is so low, right? Like,
right.
I know when we were there, there's just this, I mean, I guess at certain times of day, there's high tide and there's less beach than is seen in this photograph, but every picture I've seen of it looks more or less like this, and when we were there, it was like this too. Is that how you remember it?
I do, right. It was fantastic, basically, walking, I mean, Martella Tower, the James Joyce Tower, right, a small museum, is right there, right? So you can just go visit the museum and then walk along the Strand.
Yeah,
kind of low tide. It's definitely not, certainly not when we were there, like, not that welcoming of a beach, right? There are far more beautiful ones, right? But it's the beach that Stephen walks down, and he describes it as the snot green sea, right? So having been there myself, you can imagine Stephen Dedalus. Basically, that's what he's doing, right? Here is the action, dear reader, of this scene. Stephen Dedalus is simply walking upon the beach, right?
Yeah.
Walking upon the Strand, and he's lost in his thoughts, and he witnesses like a couple cockle pickers at one point. He sees a dog carcass, then a live dog later. But am I overlooking anything? What other action? There is no action, right?
We'll get to that in a minute, but yeah, the boy in this photograph is a bit younger than Stephen, but he's basically doing the same thing, just walking along the beach, which
ruminating.
Yeah, ruminating. It almost looks like a desert, I mean, there's you can see a bit of water, but it's a curious beach.
We were there in June, in this, the supposed summer, right? We were there for one of the days we were there was Bloomsday, right?
Yeah.
But remember, it was cold. We had like a sweater, a jacket zipped up. There was a wind zipping around. It was hardly like the antithesis, say, to the Mediterranean beach that Telemachus would have found himself on.
Right. Yeah, that's an important point. All right, so technically, there are other characters that appear, but really it's just Stephen. I thought this photograph was interesting. I don't know what film or TV version this is from, but that looks like what I would imagine him to look like with his Latin Quarter hat or Hamlet hat. I think he'd be in black rather than brown, but maybe not.
His strong nose,
He's
thin
wearing a
lips.
brown suit here. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a hint of Joyce there.
Yeah. So basically, he is the only character. Every other human or animal that appears is we experience them through his mental process, I guess you could say, his stream of consciousness.
Right. Which is very different from Bloom's, and we'll certainly talk about that with the next episode, right?
Yeah. So the plot, such as it is, I just screenshotted our chat. I think this is pretty amusing. I said, in terms of what actually happens, S, that is, Stephen, walks along the Strand, imagines visiting aunt and uncle, and then ultimately doesn't visit them, sees dead dog, fears live dog, sees live dog's owners, that's a man and a woman, the cockle pickers, writes something on scrap of paper torn from Daisy's article, fumbles for handkerchief, wipes dried snot on rock, scene.
Yep.
To which you said, can you see?
Oh yeah, haha, yep, that about covers what happens in this action-packed episode.
And then he reminisces about Paris and some acquaintances named Patrick and Kevin Egan.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
that's essentially the action of the plot, right? What happens, right, in the episode.
Yeah. Well, I've added that he reflects on various authors. The Jesuits exposed him to Aristotle and Aquinas most notably, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a mention of Swinburne and, a girl named Esther, but maybe we'll get more into that.
We
Lots
really see
of repetition, variation.
We see how learned Stephen is, how many intellectual things are going on in his head, right? But we also see how mind locked he is, or word locked, right? He is kind of cut off from the world, right, in a way that we'll see that Bloom is not. And so in that sense, it's very poignant. There are moments where Stephen is registering some really pitiable loneliness. We shouldn't forget that he's in bad shape and indebted and grieving for his mother still and guilty about it, and he feels like a failure. So in many ways, it's brilliant, this last episode of the contemporary Telemachus, where we see just what a direful state he is in.
He needs a daddy.
Father, son. That's right.
All right, well, let's get into your notes. I'll let you take this wherever you want. There's an image of Adam Kadmon.
Do you want to explain who that is?
Well, I mean, I guess according to Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism, he is I guess he'd be equivalent to the Blakean human form divine, right? Like he's the primeval, primordial man.
Right.
Which, of course, is what Adam means in ancient Hebrew. Adam,
it's basically Adam before the fall, and I guess we could maybe add to that Adam before seduced, corrupted by Eve, right? So there's this sort of pristine, divine man. Definitely more of a kind of Kabbalistic, mystical sort of vision of Christ, right? It's not a canonical vision, wouldn't you say?
You mean like canonical in the Catholic
as in
or
not,
Christian sense?
Not accepted in the canon, let's say, not part of the official story.
Well, right. I mean, it's not really Christian lore at all. It's Jewish lore, and the Kadmon part of his name I have always associated with Cadmus, the progenitor of writing, the one who taught the Phoenician who taught the Greeks how to write according to legend. And historically we know that the Greek alphabet is derived from the Phoenician alphabet, but then so is the Hebrew alphabet derived from the Phoenician alphabet. So to me, Adam Kadmon is in some ways equivalent to the mythological Cadmus of the Greeks.
Right. Well, anyway, those are the kinds of things that I think are going through Stephen's minds, right? This kind of Christian, what would you call it? Arcana, these
Well, as I say, all of those texts that the Jesuits taught him about, but also he's been doing some more occult research on his own, it looks like, right? As you say, some of these texts wouldn't have been recommended by the Jesuits necessarily. Maybe there were some like more heretically inclined professors that would have secretly exposed him to some of this lore, but I doubt it. Actually,
well,
certainly no one at the school in that he attended in Portrait would have approved of this kind of learning.
Exactly. So he has a heterodox mind, and he has been sympathizing already in episodes 1, right, and 2, I believe, with the heretics, the heretical thinkers, those who have called into question transubstantiation and consubstantiation, and there's been references to that. So I think that resonates with him, right?
He mentioned the ill-starred heresiarch.
Yeah, the heresiarch. I love that word, right? So all right, so we have that here, and he sees himself. So we started with this reference to Cadmon. We may as well jump in there. After the seemingly impenetrable opening, which we'll go back to with the ineluctable modality of the visible, he's thinking about perception and how we perceive and so on. He does see these 2 midwives, I believe, right, on the shore. And that's what gets him thinking about things like creation from nothing. What has she in the bag? He's talking about the midwife. A misbirth with a trailing navel cord hushed in ruddy wool. The cords of all link back, twinning cables of all flesh. That is why mystic monks, will you be as gods? Gaze in your omphalos. Kinch here, put me on to Edenville. Anyway, so this free associating the midwife carrying a dead baby with the navel cord, thoughts of irreverence, impiety. Will you be as gods? Gave into your omphalos. Put me on to Edenville. And that's when he gets to this notion of Adam Cadmon, spouse and helpmeet of Adam Cadmon, Hera, naked Eve. She has no navel, gaze, belly without blemish. And I'm skipping around a little bit. Womb of sin, wombed in sin, darkness, I was too, made not begotten. So here's Stephen's mind, right? And here you have all of these. He starts thinking these rather, what would you call them? Mystic thoughts about the origins of all things, about the omphalos, right? The navel cord. The naked Eve who had no navel. That's the mind that we're in here, right? So he's thinking about his own genesis, his own conception, and he's also thinking on a kind of more mythic level, right? About the origins of all humanity and consciousness, I suppose.
I missed the midwives. So they're actually there. He's not imagining them, thinking of them.
Yeah. I mean, the paragraph that begins, they came down the steps from Lee's terrace prudently, Frauenzimmer, and down the shelving shore flabbily, their splayed feet sinking in the silted sand. Miss Florence McCabe, relict of the late Patrick McCabe, deeply lamented. One of her sisterhood lugged me squealing into life. So one of the midwives lugged me squealing into life, creation from nothing. What has she in the bag? What does the midwife have in her bag? A misbirth with a trailing navel cord hushed in a ruddy wool. So yeah, I will admit that I got some help from a couple of the, sources that I consult to figure out what's happening here. The UlyssesGuide.com is very good in terms of just like plot level things that you might, in an episode like this, right? But yes, he's looking at a couple midwives here, and this is what sets his whole mind going.
So Leahy's terrace is near the Strand or something?
Yes.
Close enough that he can see?
Leahy's
I
terrace
I thought it was a memory, but he actually sees them.
He sees that, right? Exactly, and that's one of the challenging things of this chapter, right? The first time I read it, I thought he was actually visiting or seeing his aunt and uncle, and I wasn't even sure who they were.
Right.
But
Yeah,
he's just thinking about that, thinking about going to his aunt and uncles and what he'll say. He rehearses the scene briefly before he moves on to other things. And then later on,
he imagines what his father's reaction would be.
Right. So that it's those sorts of things that are. Is this happening? Is this a memory? And later on,
that one's clearer. We'll get to that later. But there's actually a line that says he says to himself, "Oh, I passed Aunt Sarah's house already. It's too late to go there." We know that he didn't. We know that he didn't actually go,
and he wasn't going to go. I mean, the guy's he's going to go basically and meet Mulligan and the rest of the crew later and get drunk, squander some more money.
So he actually knows this Mrs. Florence McCabe,
yeah.
Okay.
I believe so, yeah. Then he associates that with one of her sisterhood lugged me squealing into life. And so that's what triggers his vision of the midwives, is what triggers all these musings on kind of heterodox musings on mythic musings on the umbilical cord, the navel, birth, conception, so on and so forth. And then he thinks about himself that he was, and here he can't escape fully, can he? His Catholicism, wombed in sin darkness, I was too, made but not begotten. As much as he has rebelled against the Jesuits, he's still, his very sensibility is still, influenced by these notions of the sinful womb and original sin. He thinks about his parents. They clasped and sundered, did the coupler's will. From the ages, from before the ages, he willed me and now may not will me away or ever. But that's such a sad sort of vision of sex, right? They clasped and sundered, did the coupler's will, thinking about his parents, right? Again, disembodied Stephen, there's a kind of loathing of the act itself there, right? Which is very distinct from our boy Bloom, as we'll see, right? And his comfort with human flesh.
That's why he was wont to call himself James Joyless.
Right. And yet Joyce is, of course, Stephen and Bloom, right? So it's amazing that he sort of writes about his former self with this kind of artistic detachment to, there is a level of sort of what? Here's this lost, lonely guy, but he's also incomplete. It's almost as if we're supposed to, I wouldn't say laugh at Stephen, but realize that there's something also a bit amusing.
You said it here. There's ongoing self-mockery and self-contempt. And, right. We might say self-criticism, self-reflection. He's aware of his adolescent absurdities, I think. Well, maybe we shouldn't call him an adolescent, but he's not a fully developed man. He hasn't matured into his Jungian masculine maturity, or I don't know how to put it.
No, you're right.
He's aware of that. I think he's aware of the lack within himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So anyway, that is what this chapter is sort of like. It's really about Stephen and his mind and where it goes. And once again, I think we should just applaud Joyce for creating a character with such depth and complexity, right?
Yeah, but it is a fascinating and beautiful mind.
It is,
despite the self-mockery and self-contempt.
And I wonder if I know that this is also on your list. Just the opening paragraph with the references to the signature of all things and so on, right? I wonder if I could just read that and then we can both just talk about it. Because this is, imagine your first time reading Ulysses and you get to this paragraph and this is what you get. Ineluctable modality of the visible. At least that, if no more. Thought through my eyes. Signatures of all things I am here to read. Sea spawn and sea rack, the nearing tide, that rusty boot. Not green, blue, silver, rust, colored signs. Limits of the diaphane. But, he adds, bodies. And he was aware of them bodies before of them colored. How? By knocking his sconce against them, sure. Go easy. Bald he was and a millionaire. Maestro di color chisano. Limit of the diaphane in. Why in? Diaphane. Adiaphane. If you can put your 5 fingers through it, it is a gate, if not a door. Shut your eyes and see. So that's the opening paragraph. And you can understand how someone might read that and say, this is gibberish. I'm not going to do this. What does this even mean? And you feel lost, and you're supposed to feel lost. The next line is where we only gives a hint of what's happening, sort of. Stephen closed his eyes to hear his boots crush crackling rack and shells. Okay. We learn later that's he's walking on the beach. That's the sound of the beach that he's listening to now. But that whole first paragraph, we're in his mind. We don't know who he is. Then he was aware of them before bodies, and thanks to scholarship and so on, that he's thinking about Aristotle, right? Aristotle's ideas and so on. So anyway, that's the sort of seeming impenetrability of the opening. But then I'll turn things over to you. He is thinking about the inevitable. Here we are. He's looking out upon this kind of bleak landscape. And the line, to me, I'm interested in: signatures of all things I am here to read.
Yes.
The notion that he is a reader of all of these signs and these signatures. And the signatures are the signatures of the divine, I suppose, right? Of God, right? God's sort of visible signs, perhaps. Stephen sees himself as a reader of them. And I think this also is in keeping with Stephen as visionary, Stephen as a heterodox thinker, right? Et cetera, et cetera. There's an esotericism to some of his thoughts, I think, that's really important. What do you think about that opening? What are your thoughts about that seemingly impenetrable opening?
I mean, what a great line to conclude that paragraph with, right? This paradoxical line: shut your eyes and see.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you do that? But of course, it's because of the richness of his interior mental life that he's able to shut his eyes and see.
Right.
And we are as well.
And that's working on that metaphorical level, but it's also working on a literal level, right? Because he actually does shut his eyes to just take in the world. He then takes in the world through hearing alone, right?
The sense of hearing, yeah.
Exactly. As he hears the boots crackling, and at one point, right, with his eyes closed, he's like, "Open your eyes." No, Jesus, if I fell over a cliff that beetles o'er his base, there's Elsinore, right? Hamlet again, right? So Stephen is Hamlet. But that second paragraph, he's got his eyes closed, listening to the boots crackle and mixing in what he hears. You have a lot of onomatopoeia: crush, crack, crick, crack, wild sea money. So there we are. There's the opening too, right? We sort of orient ourselves by realizing, okay, this is a guy walking on the strand, and he's thinking all of these strange thoughts.
And there are all these callbacks to previous episodes: Hamlet, the shells that are also money. I mean,
from
we
episode
talked about
2,
those.
which we just were in.
Yeah.
So I'll just sort of jump here with from that's the opening. I think we've talked about the free associations. My other point is just that Proteus is language itself, which is flowing and shape-shifting. Philology is the study of change and the love of words. Here we are in Stephen's. This is Stephen's tide, right?
Which is the literal meaning of philology, love of words.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Just going forward, other things I noticed, at one point, one of the things, and we could linger over the opening 2 pages for a long time, right? I mean, any part here is so rich, so I'm just sort of picking stuff at random. But later he imagines the dring of mass, right? The sound of the bell. And then we have a line like, "Coven Stephen, you will never be a saint," right? Naughty Stephen, right? Who he imagines people saying that he prayed to the devil in Serpentine Avenue that the Fusby widow in front might lift her clothes, right? So Stephen, the fallen degenerate. He
would be a fan of the genre known as upskirt.
That's right, right?
Not that I know anything about that, but just...
And Joyce himself...
I've heard.
We see some of Joyce's naughty mind, right? He liked gartered legs and petticoats, and there's images later to hizing up petticoats and so on and so forth, right? But Stephen, the fallen Catholic, right? He's never going to be a saint. Stephen, satanically prayed to the devil, right? So that this widow could lift her clothes for him, right? And we know that Joyce himself was a frequent visitor, a voyeur, and a frequent visitor of the Dublin brothels, right? Before he met Nora and they went off for the continent. What else? There's also Stephen sort of castigating himself for his perceived failures. Books you were going to write with books with letters for title. And there's ongoing self-mockery, self-contempt. He's wearing his Latin Quarter hat, the Hamlet hat. And that passage to me is really funny where he mocks himself. Books you're going to write. Have you read his F? Oh, yes, but I prefer Q. Yes, but W is wonderful. Oh, yes, W. Remember your epiphanies on green oval leaves? Deeply deep copies to be sent if I died to all the great libraries of the world, including Alexandria. So profound self-mockery, right? But I mean, that's also what he wants, right? What Joyce wanted, to be the genius that the world had to take notice of, that his work would be disseminated everywhere, even to the library of Alexandria and so on. But
well,
here he is.
And he actually achieved that. On the way, he took the piss out of himself,
Oh, right.
Which is
right, for sure.
Which is one of the things we admire about him. I think it's safe to say.
I think we can say that this is just a continuation of a portrait of the artist as a young man. He's still young, right?
Mm-hmm.
Key here is young, and I think the narrative isn't it narrative young, or am I wrong about that? But anyway, he is obviously, we've already talked about how he's...
Well, this is monologue male, but yeah, earlier we had narrative young.
Right.
I think that was episode 1. That was the technique of episode 1.
We can go to the next page, and I'll try to go kind of quick here because I know you have a lot of notes, right? I'm just going to kind of move here. He does have some musings about the Egan brothers, Kevin Egan among them, right? Irish exiles and revolutionaries.
Are they real historical characters? Or
I'd have to look that up. I believe, yes, they are. He changed names as he always did, right? But yeah, Ellman's biography makes that clear. So when Joyce himself was initially his initial attempt at exile, he did meet some revolutionaries, or what were they called? They gave themselves a name, the Wild Geese or something like that. I might be wrong about that, but anyway.
Oh yeah, right. Well, that was, that's like the Irish expats that started the Hennessy, cognac venture. They called themselves that, I think.
But I think we can understand these Egan brothers, Kevin Egan, more prominent, I think, in his memories as counterpoints to Stephen, right? They're exiles, but they're political exiles. Stephen is I guess I could say, an artistic exile, right? His sensibilities. He's not going to go and be a political revolutionary. He is not going to join the struggle for homeland rule, even though he might want that. That's not his primary concern. His primary concern is to create the unconscious story of his race, I think is how he puts it at the end of a portrait, right? In the smithy of his soul. We have references signaling forwards to Bloom and backwards, right? So Fleshpot of Egypt wanders into his mind, signals forward to the upcoming Bloom episode, and then Shattered Glass and Masonry is an image we saw in episode 2. We have themes of... I'll have to dig and look, but when he's thinking about history near the beginning, I think, he has this image of shattered glass and masonry, which I always take as a kind of apocalyptic image of the kind of end of the world or end of civilization or whatever, right? There's themes of exile and homelessness. The quote, he has the key, Mulligan again, right? He's still thinking about that. I will not sleep there when the night comes. A door shut of a silent tower entombing their blind bodies. The Panzer Sahib and his pointer. So the Panzer Sahib is Haynes. The pointer is Mulligan.
Yeah.
He still feels exiled. He sees a bloated carcass of a dog, and we should remember that Stephen is called Dog's Body and thinks of himself as Dog's Body, a kind of parodic form of God's body, right?
Right.
Later, he has musings about the Vikings. Galleys of the Lachlan's ran here to the beach. Their blood is in me, their lusts, my waves. So Daedalus is sort of creating his own ancestors. And we also know that Joyce himself was fascinated by the Vikings and felt that he had Viking blood in himself, right?
Yeah.
He had his very blue Viking-like eyes, right? Stephen at one point wonders...
And he's also culturally appropriating the Greeks, of course, throughout.
Exactly. He appropriates everything, right?
Yeah.
Unapologetically. Stephen at one point... Cancel him. Stephen wonders at one point if he'd save a drowning swimmer, and unlike, Mulligan, who has saved a drowner before. Would he do it? He liked to think he would, but he has this fear of water. He sees some cockle pickers. I'm sure we'll talk about them a little bit later. One of my favorite moments, though, is this moment of clairvoyance where he recalls a dream. It says, "Open hallway, street of harlots. Remember, Harun al-Rashid, I am almosting it. That man led me, spoke, I was not afraid. The melon he held against my face, smiled, cream fruit." And this vision of Harun al-Rashid, a sort of
pictured here.
Do you want to talk about who he is?
Well, I don't know much about him, but he evokes images of Near Eastern, Ottoman, Islamic rule. He's some kind of sultan. And Stephen and I guess Joyce, Bloom, the reader, might associate him with this sort of Oriental fantasy, which is also related to flesh pots of Egypt,
Yeah, we'll see a lot of that kind of Oriental imagery with Bloom later. And in fact, we're meant to think about this vision as a kind of, I think, right, a kind of premonition of Bloom, whom he's fated to meet. The melon and the cream fruit, those are images that will be associated with Bloom, as we'll see, right? And he sees this Harun al-Rashid, the man led me, spoke, I was not afraid. So the sort of dream of a surrogate father or a guide, a masculine guide who's going to help him in some way, right? And to me, what I love the most, Streets of Harlots, that foreshadows what we see later in Bella Cohen's brothel, right?
Yes.
The hallucinatory, in the, is it the Circe episode?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's premonitions are happening here, and I think that what I love the most is when it says, "I am almosting it." Like Stephen feels right there, I'm on the verge of something. I'm seeing something very important here, and just to finish up here.
But he has to struggle to remember. He's telling himself, "Remember."
Right. Exactly. And finally,
it's still vague, and maybe he's read something about Harun al-Rashid and doesn't, of course, at this point, he doesn't know that he's going to meet an Oriental Messiah father figure type in Bloom later in the day, right?
Exactly. And
but do you have more specifics on Harun al-Rashid?
Yeah, just tell us open it up here. The Ulysses annotated for the ones who want to go insanely deep. You can always look up your references that you want to go deeper in, but he was, apparently, his years were 763 to 808, Caliph of Baghdad, enlightened monarch, an Oriental despot, whose reign was, for the most part, successful, his empire prosperous. He was a lover of luxury and pleasure, and a patron of learning and the arts. He is reputed to have disguised himself and wandered among his people to keep himself aware of their moods and concerns. That's important, right? Bloom is sort of the Odysseus in disguise, wandering the streets of Dublin, right? A wise, benevolent ruler, a lover of luxury and pleasure, and a patron of learning the arts. I think those things certainly relate to Bloom as well. So this might be my favorite moment of the episode. This moment of clairvoyance. This I am almosting it. I just love that. I don't know. I just love that.
Well, and it also reminds me of the fact that Molly is associated with Andalusia. She calls herself the Andalusian girl, and as you well know, that part of Spain is very much influenced by Moorish, Arabic, Oriental, Islamic culture, so there's a flavor of that in her as well.
Exactly. Yes.
Which we don't know about now, but we will.
We'll get to Molly. Molly's mother was Spanish, interestingly, right? So, but we'll get to that, right? I don't know if I have any more notes or not, but
you do.
I do. Good Lord, I'm going to try to go quick again. At one point, I just struck by this almost gothic vision. He comes, pale vampire, through storm his eyes, his bat sails blooding the sea, mouth to her mouth's kiss. Just
Is he imagining himself there?
that's what I'm not sure about that, right?
Yeah.
And here, some of the things I just love the language.
Yes.
like this here, his lips lipped and mouthed fleshless lips of air, mouth to her womb, all wombing tomb. I think the first time we read this, almost 30 years ago, 28 years ago, we made a big deal about womb tomb, but the way in which
that's one of the
death,
major motifs.
I mean, death and life, right? And that's certainly, I think you know this better than I, but Finnegan's Wake, he takes those ideas, those primordial ideas, even further, right?
But maybe we're also maybe this is like the first inkling of him awakening to the body, mouth to her womb, right? That's a pretty arresting physical image. Like he's getting, we see that he has the potential to get out of his head. Maybe it is only sexually, but at least he's able to escape the excessive intellectualism,
right,
and inhabit his body,
right. And I would also say
sex.
that in terms of the context when this was written, we shouldn't forget how there are more explicit references, but these sorts of mouth to her womb, the book was deemed obscene and banned in many countries.
This would have been one
right?
of the problematic passages for sure.
Absolutely. So we have those kinds of associations. And then there's some moments near the end that are very poignant to me where we get a sense for Stephen's inner turmoil, right? He's there and thinks to himself, who watches me here? Who ever anywhere will read these written words? Signs on a white field. But again, this angst about... Interesting that he says, read these written words. He's thinking of his thoughts as written already. And obviously, the meta level is that they are written by Joyce, right? But if we just think about the character, I mean, to him, he is the reader of the signs, right? The reader also has to write what he reads, the signs on the white field. And I think that's probably related to that weaver of the wind, a reference earlier in either book 1 or 2. Stephen thinking of himself as a kind of prophetic voice, right? But he also is afraid that he's locked and that nobody's going to ever read his thoughts, right? So there's
the wind. We pointed out that Nestor or Daisy could be a kind of windbag as well.
Right.
He might. I remember we talked about that weaver of the wind phrase, which is, I think, at the beginning of episode 2, but I thought maybe it could foreshadow the appearance of Daisy. We may get to this later, but he does literally write something on that scrap of paper that he tears off of Daisy's article. True. So let's not forget that. There is some actual writing that takes place, but we saw signatures at the beginning, and here we have signs. Of course, those are etymologically related. So
exactly. It's just that who watches me here? That's kind of interesting, right? Because it's like
amazing. That's one of the best. Yeah, one of my favorite passages.
He definitely feels kind of isolated, godless, motherless, guilty, etc.
And there's also a self-consciousness, right, that we talked about before. He's overly self-conscious because he's too much the inhabitant of his own mind, right? So
absolutely,
not only is he asking, like, is anyone watching me? Like, why does no one pay attention to me? He's also self-conscious, like, wait, is someone watching me?
Right.
Am I making a fool of myself?
Right. Yeah, all of that, for sure. Last couple of things, just his profound loneliness and longing, right? Touch me, soft eyes, soft hand. I am lonely here. Oh, touch me soon now. What is that word known to all men? I am quiet here alone, sad too. Touch me. I mean, just almost embarrassingly but poignantly sort of moving that, but behind all of these abstruse thoughts about philosophy and perception and sin and so on, there's this angst, this longing for connection. He wants union, right? He's lonely. let's not forget he's a young man, right?
Well,
And
just before I forget, and there's something else I wanted to say too, but later Bloom also uh visits Sandy Mount Strand, right? And
right.
so instead of waiting for someone else to touch him, he touches himself, as
I,
we'll find out
I,
later. Maybe that's the difference between the young man and the mature man. It's
oh,
like I'm not gonna pine away. I'm gonna take care of business myself.
while watching Nausicaa on the shore, we will get to that episode, which, yeah, another obscene episode, and
Hmm.
it would be obscene and offensive to uh,
Oh yeah.
today's righteous readers, right? But we'll deal with that later with the Nausicaa.
Hmm.
The last two pages just has so much striking imagery, right? Joyce at his poetic best. He's looking at, I suppose, the weeds, seaweeds, The writhing weeds lift languidly and sway reluctant arms, hising up their petticoats. Again, Joyce loves hiked up petticoats. We know that. Full fathom 5, my father lies. He meditates more on the drowned man near the end. We talked about the drowned man earlier, right? That seems to be a recurring motif.
Mm-hmm.
Bag of corpse gas sopping in foul brine.
That's great.
That's the dog, the literal dog's body, right? The dog carcass that he sees.
Well, I
I
thought
think.
I thought it was he was imagining the drowned man
No, you're right. You're right.
surfacing.
Yeah. Oh, I should read that then. So you're right. You're right. I was associated with dead dog, but maybe that's part of it too. But bag of corpse gas sopping in foul brine, a quiver of minnows, fat of a spongy timbit, flash through the slits of his button trouser fly. God becomes man, becomes fish, becomes barnacle goose, becomes feathered mountain. And then we have that. What is it?
Metempsychosis.
Metempsychosis, which we'll get to in the next episode. These sort of transformations. We also get there the theme of the book, language and even being sort of in flux, if you will.
Hmm.
Come, I thirst, a reference to Christ, right? He feels himself anguished as Christ does. Toothless Kinch, the Superman, right? More self-mockery and sense of artistic failure. So when you compile the notes, I was compiling the notes, it's like, this is what this chapter is. And I suppose, if you grow to love it, you definitely grow to love it upon revisitation. Wouldn't you say, right? Now that you've visited it 4 or 5 times, and you've grown to love it probably more than I have.
Yeah, and again, it's the phrases and the imagery, and
right.
what would we call the womb tomb concept? It's beyond phrase and imagery. It's like a theme. There are these great, profound thematic elements that appear throughout the work. And
Molly will be associated with a primordial womb, the mother, the life giver. We're going to visit the graveyard, the tomb. In the 3rd episode that we see Bloom, he goes to the funeral, right? So yes, profound, great stuff.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is that maybe, I don't know if it's specific to this episode, maybe it's all 3 of the first episodes. Daedalus is also Icarus, right? The father is the son, and we really see Stephen Daedalus as being, he's the hero of Portrait, right? And I think we both identified with him proudly when we first read it, but he's kind of wrecked and fallen when we meet him again in Ulysses, right? Like he flew too close to the sun. We expected him to achieve glory, and he goes to Paris and then he crashes and burns and has to come crawling back to Ireland. So we're seeing like the wreckage of Icarus after he's flown too close to the sun. So
it's been about a year, I think, since his mother's death. So he's been back for a year, and he is absolutely stagnant. He's in a state of paralysis, right? Which is exactly what Joyce was so expert in diagnosing, and he does so unflinchingly in Dubliners, right?
Yeah.
That's the major sort of the theme, paralysis, right? Inability to move forward.
All right, well, let's keep moving.
Uh-oh.
My goodness. All right, there's some overlap, so hopefully we can move through this quickly. So we already talked about the ineluctable modality of the visible, but there's also the ineluctable modality of the audible. We I guess hinted at that before. And then, he has this phrase, the ineluctable modality of the ineluctable visuality. He's really playing with the phraseology there. Shut your eyes and see, we talked about. Yeah, and a lot of my notes repeat yours, the signatures of all things. I'm here to read, snot green, blue, silver, rust, colored signs. So re-emphasizing the colors of this episode, green and blue, and there's also a rust. He plays with these polarities, diaphane, adiaphane, nacheinander, nebeneinander. And then, we've seen the ash plant from the beginning, from episode 1. I think we talked about how it's associated with a sword that becomes important in that Circe scene that you mentioned in the brothel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an ash sword, an ash plant, a stick, an augur's rod of ash.
Right.
So it has like multiple functions.
So
It could be a weapon, could be a walking stick, it could be like a diviner's or almost a magician's wand of sorts, right?
Ooh, what better sort of representation of the associations of language, right? The way that one thing can refer to another, one thing can become another. Joyce was a obvious genius in that, right? The way in which language moves and mutates and so on, and he takes it to another level in Finnegan's Wake. Certainly.
Well, it's not explicit here, but Lawrence taught us that the rod, Aaron's rod, is also a phallic symbol, right?
Right.
This is a great line. Am I walking into eternity along Sandy Mount Strand?
That is great.
I mean, that random thought that he has, I'm sure that's been underlined and highlighted by many people.
What is it about that line that is so arresting for you?
I mean,
it is for me too.
I felt that when we were there. I guess I felt that maybe because I had just read it before we visited, and I had it in mind. But as you walk along a beach by yourself or even with someone else, it seems like you could just keep walking into eternity.
Right. It's a very flat beach, right? So you can just see out into the horizon, and it seems to be limitless in its snot greenness and so on. Right?
And if you didn't walk along the strand but went directly toward the low tide, eventually you'd just be swallowed up at high tide. You could literally walk into eternity along the strand.
Right.
Strand is an interesting word. As ugly Americans, we'd probably be more likely to call it a beach, wouldn't we?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the onomatopoeia of crush, crack, crick, crick, but what's important about it to me is the association. Well, he actually says wild sea money. So this is why I think, those shells in episode 2 that he was playing with are related to the money that he gets from Daisy. And here it's explicit, wild sea money. The earliest currency was shells, cowrie shells. It may also remind us of the empty shells of the Kabbalah, like the Sephirot on the Tree of Life have like dark aspects, which are the Hebrew word means like shells. They summon like dark energy. There's a lot of reference to the sea. Well, Homer's wine dark sea, right? Oinopaponton, which is the mighty mother of Swinburne, whom he and Mulligan call Algernon Charles Swinburne, pictured here. The mighty mother, but the sea is also masculine, old father ocean. So that that's interesting in that it relates to the sea is also a shapeshifter, right? Even its gender can change.
Yeah, the sea is androgynous.
Yeah.
Which we'll see that Bloom himself is androgynous in many ways. Mm-hmm. He is that womanly man.
Womanly man, yeah. And so, yeah, the passage that we already talked about struck me as well. Put me onto Edenville. Aleph, Alpha, not one. Spouse and helpmate of Adam Kadmon, Hava, naked Eve, womb of sin, womb to her, mouth to her womb. Yeah, a lot of overlap here. This phrase also struck me, the divine substance wherein Father and Son are consubstantial. That's going to be important, more so later. You've got all these saints, Arius, the ill-starred heresiarch. We talked about that. Dan Occam, I guess that's the Occam of Occam's razor. Columbanus is mentioned again. Aquinas, St. Ambrose, the Isle of Saints. Again, a lot of these phrases are catching my attention. I'm delighting in the language. The steeds of Manannan. This is the Irish sea god.
Right.
It's appropriate he's thinking about that. All right, so there's mention of the ship. That's appropriately nautical. That's where they're going to meet for the piss up, right? They're going to meet to have drinks.
Mm-hmm.
It's at the ship.
And there's also a ship, a vision of an actual ship at the very end of the chapter.
Yep, that comes later. And then there's mention of the pigeon house, which I guess is the place in Paris where he drank with the Egan brothers.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
This line made me chuckle. Go easy with that money like a good young imbecile. So here's the Aunt Sarah bit. Am I going to Aunt Sarah's or not? And then he mentions an Aunt Sally. I don't know if that's the same person. You can see how confusing this becomes. Uncle Si, apparently that's a reference to his father, Simon Dedalus. So he's imagining his cousin talking about his father. Skew-eyed Walter sirring his father. This is a reference to Nuncle Richie, who is the husband of Aunt Sarah, apparently. Chrissy is apparently the daughter. Right. He imagines Uncle Richie, who is apparently bedridden. He's some kind of lawyer or law clerk. And when Stephen comes over, he insists that they drink whiskey together. Right. But as we said, all of this is in his head because at some point he says, I have passed the way to Aunt Sarah's. So, when we initially read it, we might think, oh, he's actually going there. Oh, this is actually happening. But by the end, we find out, no, he just imagined what could have happened if he had gone there. Or maybe he's remembering something that did happen. And then after all, he didn't go. So apparently Sarah and Richie and their kids, Walter and Chrissy, live near the Strand. But he doesn't visit them on this day.
Here's what the annotated says, Aunt Sarah Golding, the wife of Richie Golding. Richie Golding is Stephen's mother's brother. Right? They are modeled on Joyce's aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. William Murray. So,
okay, so Richie is the mother's brother. I thought he was an uncle by marriage. I thought he married the mother.
Right.
No,
right.
That's
no,
not
apparently,
right.
Yeah, Richie Golden is Stephen's mother's brother. So Uncle Richie is his blood uncle.
I see. So Sarah is the aunt by marriage.
Right.
Got it. Not that it matters, but we're getting in deep to the details. All right, Wilde appears again. Wilde's Requiescat, and then Wilde's love that dare not speak his name. That becomes important later. I think in the library scene, but we'll see. Wilde again is mentioned by Mulligan as well. So he's kind of a rival, or I don't know, a forefather, a literary forefather for Stephen and maybe Mulligan as well.
Right.
And maybe the Irish Renaissance folk like Yeats and Lady Gregory and so on. But he's someone that they look up to and also react against, maybe all of those characters. Yeah, so this next bullet point here, I think maybe I took this too much to heart. Books you were going to write with letters for titles. I've actually started a series of books with letters for titles. Of Letters in a Man, A is the first volume of my epic poem, of which I have published only the one volume. So B is in the works. But rereading this, I realize, I'm probably ripping off Joyce here too, as in so many other ways. One of the alphabet books I was going to write. Maybe this is where I got the idea.
That's
subconsciously. Yeah.
Did that project came about? Do you remember? Did the idea come about after you had read Ulysses or before?
Of course, yeah.
Okay,
but the actual reason is that it's an epic, right? And
it's an epic of language.
The Homeric epic is 22 books, right? Or 24 books, right? Because of the 24 books or 24 letters of the Greek alphabet, right?
Right.
So my epic is 26 books, one volume for each letter of the English alphabet.
You and Daedalus are more alike than ever.
Yeah, so that was the logic of that architecture, but subconsciously this had to have been stirring around. So we've got these amazing words. They're individual words. Contransmagnificanjubantantiality on page 38. Mahamanvantara, loud Latin laughing. Frickin', that looks like a Dutch word. I'd have to look that one up. Medieval abstrusiosities and rogue words. Just delightful linguistic play.
And rogue words, that basically is a good sort of pithy, almost embodiment of Stephen's fluctuating language, right? They're rogue words.
Yeah,
going their own way. I mean, he's not willing these words. The words are going through him.
Yeah, but also they're roguish in that they're scatological and
right.
I mean, maybe Joyce more so than Stephen, but they're bad words, naughty words, right? Roguish words as well as being like fugitive. I thought the descriptions of the brothers Patrice and Kevin Egan were interesting because how does he interact with them? He drinks with them, right? Kevin Egan is sipping his green fairy as Patrice is white. There's mention of the frog green, wormwood green, right? We've got the green color of this episode, but also I'm assuming they're drinking absinthe, wormwood.
Right. And if Kevin Egan is the Menelaus character, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, he's some kind of, not mentor necessarily, but he's like a more mature,
an elder, wiser figure, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen would not agree with him intellectually, and I don't think he would look up to him intellectually, but he would probably feel like less of a man. His masculinity would be challenged by these characters, I'm guessing, right? Because they're men of action, and he's a bookish,
Right. And yet here there's always a kind of slight dig, isn't there? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Kevin Egan sipping his green fairy as Patrice his white.
Yeah.
Like a little contempt there for these men of action, right?
But when in their presence, he's probably not going to directly challenge and mock them. He does that in the privacy of his thoughts, or in his study as he's writing or whatever. So we mentioned the Latin quarter hat, which he also calls his Hamlet hat, and he notes that the cockle pickers make a side eye at his Hamlet hat. I thought that was a nice phrase.
We have more self-mockery. He's remembering also his time at he's wearing it, but he also wore that in Paris, right? My Latin quarter hat. God, we simply must dress the character. I want puce gloves. So he's mocking his own pretensions, his own sartorial pretensions and poetic pretensions.
Isn't puce a kind of green as well?
Yeah, puce is a brownish purple. I had to look that up.
Oh, not green at all.
No, yep.
Okay, so a little bit of play with the color. All right, so continuing, I think it's important that we have the first mention of flesh pots of Egypt. And according to Google AI, a biblical idiom from Exodus 16:3 referring to the imagined or remembered comforts, security, and food, specifically meat-filled cooking pots, the Israelites enjoyed while enslaved in Egypt. It symbolizes the temptation to prioritize material security and physical pleasure. Remember the cream fruit in the dream, over freedom and spiritual growth, often used to describe nostalgia for a comfortable but detrimental past. You can see an image of the flesh pots. There's mention of the red Egyptians that maybe foreshadows the Aeolus chapter or episode whose color is red. He flashes back to the 17th of February of this year. We're now in June. It's June 16th, so can't remember what the specific incident on that day was that he was remembering, but thought it was interesting that this date was remembered. So we learn here that the telegram he received when he was in Paris said, "Mother dying, come home, father." That's interesting. There are other Irish revolutionary characters mentioned. Arthur Griffith, Monsieur Drummond, who may or may not be an actual historical character, but Maud Gonne certainly is. This is the woman that Yeats lusted for all his life and jerked off
Abjectly and forlornly his whole life.
Yeah,
right, that's right.
He I mean, literally, I think I shared that passage from his memoirs wherein he confessed that he would go off into the forest and fantasize about her and jerk off, and then he'd have the flu for 2 weeks or something.
Oh, Jesus.
He he lost all his chi. He didn't practice semen retention, so he lost all his energy.
Was that he was into those sorts of theosophical ideas, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But whatever occult rituals he practiced to try to interest and enchant her didn't work, apparently. So there's mention of the bath, which, is important in the next episode. Bit of foreshadowing there.
The episode after that, the Lotus Eaters episodes, right?
Yeah.
Where Bloom goes to take a bath.
Oh, so episode 5, you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so he flashes back to the tower. We talked about the Panther Sahib and his pointer. There's also mention of a pard, a panther, the bloated carcass of the dog, poor dog's body. There's also a live dog named Tatters. I mean, that's kind of interesting. The cockle pickers have a pet dog who discovers a dead dog. The live dog pisses on a rock, and the description of that is really funny. He pissed short quick or something like that. The pleasures of the poor. I always thought that was an interesting line. But he discovers a dead dog, and of course that reminds Stephen of Dog's Body, and then the drowned man that we knew about. The cockle pickers, and for those that don't know, cockle pickers pick shells on the seashore, and they actually have edible seafood of some sort in them. Do you have anything more about cockle pickers? I've got a picture here, but I'm not sure what kind of slimy creature is in those shells.
This is just one of the moments where he actually registers something that he sees. He sees these impoverished cockle pickers on the shore, right? And to me, it's sort of interesting that they're the that's like I guess the cockle picker as megapenthes, right? And here you have this kind of parodic echo, right? with these two figures.
Well, I mean, specifically, what do cockle pickers pick? What are the cockles? They're shells with what inside? They're not clams. They're not clamming. Or are they?
Good question. Something
Yeah.
edible, I would suppose.
Yeah, they are edible. I mean, I think that's the point. They're picking them either to eat them themselves or they're going to sell them, right?
That's what I took it as. Cockle pickers are probably going to sell that.
Yeah. So maybe for the show notes we can resolve what exactly what kind of seafood it is they pick. Like if they're along Sandy Mount Strand, what could one expect to find? I didn't see any when we were there. I don't remember seeing any, but I don't think I looked that closely for them. Maybe I should have. But I always thought that was an interesting phrase. I first encountered it here. Cockle pickers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
A musical phrase. All right, so this is a great line. These heavy sands are language, tide, and wind have silted here. There's like a natural language of the sea and of the beach. The drowned man we mentioned, the Vikings, the dream. No need to repeat that, but let me read this section here, which we alluded to before. Old Daisy's letter here, thanking you for hospitality. Tear the blank end off. Turning his back to the sun, he bent over far to a table of rock and scribbled words. So here we see that, I mean, this is one of the literal actions that he takes, right?
Right.
He humorously reads, thanking you for your hospitality, blah, blah, whatever. He tears off the bottom part, and apparently he has a pencil in his pocket, and he writes something. What does he write? It's not really clear. We're never really told what exactly he writes. Something that he thought about, one of these lines, you know? But after he does write this, and this is such a great allegory of the writer. Every writer, no matter how esteemed, even a master like Joyce, at the end of the day, he's a scribbler, right? He's someone who tears off paper and writes doodles, or
yeah,
as Faulkner said, that man has this desire to express himself. Even if he has to carve something on a rock, he'll do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's also sort of a parodic image of the romantic poet, right? If
Yes.
you think about the romantic poets who go out into nature and experience the Wordsworthian sublime or whatnot, they're like channeling the prophecies that they then write, right? Here's Stephen, impoverished, indebted, guilt-ridden artist who tears off the sheet and like scribbles down by this very unpoetic shore, right? This is not a sort of traditional romantic image. This lonely shore on in Ireland,
and this too is one of the simple pleasures of the poor, right? He is to be numbered among the poor, and so he has to use a rock for a table.
Right.
Yeah, but then he immediately wonders, who watches me here? Whoever anywhere will read these written words, signs on a white field. That's the same phrase you called attention to, but it's such a great one. I mean, that should be signs, not sign. That's such a memorable passage. And then at the end, he laid. So after, these are the two creative actions our artist, the one depicted in Portrait of the Artist, takes in this episode. He scribbles something on scratch paper that he tears off someone else's document, and then he picks his nose and wipes it on a rock.
And then he wonders if someone's going to see him.
And then yeah. For the rest, let look who will. He looks around. Did anyone see me?
There's sort of defiance there. The next line is behind. Perhaps there is someone. Right?
Yeah.
Is there someone watching me?
Right. So to wrap it up, there's the ship that you alluded to before. It's specifically a three-master. That's literally a ship with three masts. But it reminds me of the Greek trireme, right? Like, so that's the epic Greek trireme would be a ship of war, but the Three Master is a more modest seagoing vessel, appropriate for a comic epic, you might say.
And that's the last image of the chapter. After he wipes his snot on the ledge of the
Right.
rock, he turns around and he sees moving through the air high spars of a three-master, her sails brailed up on the cross trees, homing upstream, silently moving, a silent ship. So I don't know, an interesting image, right? A ship. Is it coming into port? Right? Is it going out to sea? Is it a sign? Is it a good omen for our struggling hero? Right? But that's the image we're left with.
It reminds me of the ship in that Auden poem, right? It had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. You know,
Right,
about suffering, they were never wrong. So all of this, if we relate it to this episode, all of this activity, intellectual, mental activity, is taking place in Stephen's mind, but the rest of the world doesn't care, right? The
It's
ship.
interesting that it's a silent ship too, right?
Yeah.
Like he registers it through the ineluctable modality of the visible, but not the audible. For whatever that's worth. He can't hear it. Maybe he can't hear what it means. I don't know.
But the world, the universe, is indifferent to the impoverished artist, or maybe even the successful artist, right? Like life goes on, is the implication there. What did you think about this?
Just not to belabor this, but it is Joyce. Don't you think it? In addition to that, it also suggests the idea of voyage and of departure too, right? So there's that embedded in as well, right? And since we are reading a contemporary Ulysses, right? The Odyssey here, we know that the importance of ships, right? The opening of the Odyssey, the Mentes, the stranger comes on a ship to deliver a sign to Telemachus. Mentes is Athena,
that's
disguise.
We have to see it that way as well. But it's like it's muted, right? Because it's not a glorious trireme, a Greek ship of war, a seagoing vessel to take the young hero on his odyssey. It's just a silent ship that passes by in the distance, completely oblivious to him.
We'll probably encounter ships later. I'm not. That's something I don't remember if there are more ships or images of ships.
Well, that's the name of the tavern, right? You've got.
Right. Of course,
the pub where they meet or whatever. So, what about just to wrap this up? What about the phrase "hour," the faunal noon? It's almost noon. Maybe by the time this episode is over, it is noon. Pan's hour. Pan, panic. Can we relate that to Proteus in some way? I mean, is
Pan sort of what is it?
Force of
chaos and disorder.
Yeah, panic. Right. Our word panic comes from Pan. So is it? Is that some kind? Is the chaos of Pan related to the shape shifting, the protean nature of Proteus?
Right. Maybe so. Also, Pan is associated with Dionysus, right? He's of that ilk, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Dionysus himself was an imported god from the east, interestingly, right?
And a shape shifter.
Right, exactly. And Pan also perhaps refers to the disorder, perhaps of Stephen's life, and he's going to go to the pub and drink, and the culmination of a long day and night will be at the hallucinatory brothel where everything is in a Pan-like frenzy, right?
Okay, just a few more random notes here. I mean, we may as well, right?
This is Proteus, right?
Why not? So, we talked about form of my form. This is the musing on Aristotle. But isn't this a great phrase or couple of lines? You will find my words dark. Darkness is in our souls, do you not think? I mean, couldn't that be like an epigraph of a great novel? Just taken out of context is just
right. Beautiful. You find my words dark. Darkness is in our souls, do you not think? Flutier. Our souls, shame wounded by our sin, cling to us yet more. A woman to her lover clinging, the more, the more. Interesting that the soul is associated with a clinging woman here, right? And the form of form is the soul, right? So Stephen
Well,
in his mind.
we know Stephen has a darkness about him. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's
Nobody would
sullen
call
and
Stephen
brooding.
yeah, no one would call him a sunny fellow, right?
No.
Our friend Brian, who joined us briefly for episode 1, talked about how Stephen's not that likable, is he? It's like in
Yeah,
many ways
right.
he's not, right? But he's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Well, the mention of women, of course, is important. Throughout, he's thinking of naked women. He says, "I see her skirties."
Skirts
You know,
again.
he mentions an Esther from Paris, a girl I knew in Paris. Then
Mm-hmm.
who do you think this is about? She trusts me.
I
Some
don't
some
know.
other some other bit. What she? The virgin at Hodges Figgis's window on Monday. Then later, touch me, and then I thought this was indicative of his, or this is like characteristic of him. As I am, all or not at all. I read that as meaning like, we either go all the way or not at all. I mean, he's that kind
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
of
he is.
that's the kind of thing he would insist on if you were to have a relationship with someone,
Yeah,
all or not at all.
and that's basically Joyce, right? He did
Yeah.
all. I mean, what he's created here is insane and unprecedented. This work, right? He went all in, and as if to best himself, he went on to Finnegan's Wake afterwards, which, as I mentioned before, you have done. I have not. I'm not sure if I will, but anyway, Joyce as the artist who goes all in.
Yeah, the Cock Lake, if you look at a map of Sandymount Strand, you might see the Cock Lake nearby. So he has a thought about that for those of you who are interested in geography. The old hag with yellow teeth, that's a great description of Queen Victoria. It's
Is
mentioned
that who's
a
your?
couple of
Is that
times.
who's?
Yeah,
That's who
yeah,
he's
this
referring to.
Monsieur
Okay,
Drumont refers to her as such, the old hag with yellow teeth.
that's fantastic.
Hilarious.
That's fantastic.
And there's reference to Lucifer in a Latin phrase, Lucifer. Lucifer, I say, knows not the um the setting of the sun. Lucifer is the bright one. So
Mm-hmm.
we've got almost a Baudelairian image of the rebel poet as satanic, romantic or something.
Right, and then the silent ship.
And the
Uh,
silent ship.
Going back to the old hag with yellow teeth, so Queen Victoria dies in 1901. So this is happening 1904. Technically, we're in a post-Victorian age, or the last ebb of the, I suppose, right, the Victorian age, right? And what a great image to to embody that. The old hag with yellow teeth, right? Completely irreverent. Absolutely what you would call un-Victorian, right? If you think of the Victorian sensibility about propriety and manners and so on, right? That era is gone now. And we're in this new era where this kind of parody and mockery and irreverence is flourishing, right?
But also it was always a sham. She
Yeah,
was
right,
always an
right,
old hag with yellow teeth, and
right.
his the people he admires, like Swinburne, you know
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
rebelled
good point.
against that, and
Right, right.
Wild,
And wild. True,
right?
true, true.
Like they weren't your typical Victorians by any means. All
All
right,
right.
so as
There it
always,
is.
support HJS or don't. And you can find this on my Substack and here on YouTube. I hope the streaming worked this time. Who knows if it actually did? I guess I'll soon find out. But we did it. We finished
Yeah, we
episode
did.
3 in under 2 hours. I guess that's good.
And I would also say that it was kind of apt for this fragmented Protean chapter where nothing on the surface seems to happen that we would delve into such specificity. And I suspect for the upcoming Bloom ones, of course, we'll do deep dives into particular moments, but they may not be the catalog may not be as extensive. This is the way to.
It's like how do we discuss it? we've taken the approach of listing bullet points. We each list bullet points and then we discuss them. Is that the best way to do it? I mean, how else would we do it? Like after discussing the basics, we talk about the schema of each episode. We give a brief plot summary, talk about the characters. I mean, what else is there to do but delight in the bits and pieces that we enjoy, you know, that we
Absolutely.
delight in the language, the imagery, the phraseology, the ideas. And yeah, there's overlap and that can get tedious, but we want to be thorough, you know.
And yeah, my only point is that this chapter, perhaps that kind of reading is amplified further, given how fragmented it is, right? Given that this is the chapter where first-time readers will oftentimes bail out. But I think if you look at the opening where Stephen is thinking to himself of the signatures of all things I am here to read, that is essentially what readers have to do with this chapter to make sense of it. Perhaps definitely more so than the first two chapters and the ones coming up, right? You have to read these signatures that are scattered everywhere. How else do you read this? This is not a traditional narrative, right? You have to sort of wade through all these fragments and moments and sort of piece them together, if you will.
Do you think he was successful? Let's say his purpose was to, through language, somehow capture the motions of the tide, right? If tide is the symbol, does he successfully do that through language? Does he successfully depict the shape-shifting of the human mind and of nature? Or does it was that an impossible task that no one could do, no one could accomplish, no one could achieve, but okay, we admire him for trying?
I think I would say it's a success. Otherwise, I'm not sure I'd be talking about it, right? I mean, in every chapter, he's sort of doing that, right? In terms of stream of consciousness and its different varieties with different characters and different moments of the day, right? This chapter just seems to be like cripplingly impenetrable upon first glance, right? But we will get
more so than 1 and 2, right?
Yeah,
more so than
one,
episodes
two,
1 and 2,
and so more so than
so
4,
it
5,
has
and
that,
6.
Yeah, so it does have that shape-shifting quality. I mean, I'm just wondering to what degree these techniques of each episode are really that distinctive, you know? Like he calls episode 1 narrative young. Okay, what does that mean? He calls episode 2 catechism, and then episode 3 is monologue male. Like are they stylistically that different? Because detractors, those who don't appreciate Joyce like we do, non-Joyceans, unlike us, they would say it's, in the end, it's all the same. It's all just, you know, wordplay and stream of consciousness, and then he'll throw in some onomatopoeia. Like he's really not doing anything that different. I don't agree with that assessment, but like how would one argue that he is successful to the skeptics?
I mean, I'm not sure. I would say that Joyce is not for everybody, right? But Joyce is certainly for people beyond just the two of us here trying to make sense of this work. I mean, it generated Bloomsday, and Bloomsday is celebrated every year in Ireland. We were there one year. And people are celebrating this as a living work, as a community, however small that community might be, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer would be. I'm trying to find a Joyce at one point in an interview when he was asked about whether his stream of consciousness, you know, does it really depict the way the mind really works? And he sort of dismisses that. Look, I did what I had to do to get my troops across the bridge, right, in these 18 different ways. And for all I care, after I got them across the bridge, I'm happy to blow that bridge up. And, you know, like that was his sort of irreverent reply. I'm going to find that for next time because I think it's just a wonderful, very Joycean response to that kind of question. But is this really how the mind actually works, right? In the end, it's like, look, I did what I had to do to get these
Right.
18 episodes across in my way. I don't give a shit really if that's
It's
the
a
way.
device.
Take
Yes,
it.
yes, yes.
It's a device. Take it or leave it. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But I mean,
I also
that's
came,
great, right?
yeah. Again, there's that self criticism, self mockery, self
But he's also
undermining.
he's mocking the question too,
Sure,
right?
sure, absolutely.
Right.
But I came across another quote. Maybe it was from that Ulysses guide earlier this week. Um, he seemed in later years, after he had forgotten about it and moved on to Finnegan's Wake, he said, I may have over systematized
Mm-hmm.
Ulysses, something like that. Like all of this concern with the schemata and, you know, techniques and symbols and organs and all that.
Right.
He was
Right.
willing to
There.
admit that if that's helpful for you, then fine. But at a certain point, you got to forget all that and just read.
Well, I think that's a good point, though, that he's aware of the criticisms, and I think there's validity to those. That people that say it's over constructed, right? That it's
Mm-hmm.
over constructed. It's just too many layers, too much construction, etc. If we were to contrast it with a book like Miss Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, also taking place just in a day, that stream of consciousness and the way she goes from the minds of various characters, it's much more fluid. It's not an easy book, right? But compared to Ulysses, you can just flow through it much more easily than this very oftentimes difficult construction. And so, that is a valid critique. For people who want to, for some, it's not, it's too pieced together, cobbled together, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I found the quote, and I just want to read it real fast because it was in a letter to Harriet Shaw Weaver, right? From June 24th, 1921. And this is what he said. He said, "From my point of view, it hardly matters whether the technique, interior monologue, is veracious, quote unquote, or not. It has served me as a bridge over which to march my 18 episodes. And once I have got my troops across, the opposing forces can, for all I care, blow the bridge sky high."
That's great.
I love
Yeah.
that quote so much. I mean, that is
Yeah.
just Joyce at his irascible fuck you best.
Well, and whatever you need to complete the compositional task at hand is valid. Do what you have to do, and then whatever.
Right.
I'm just thinking about my own writing and how I've used similar tricks like that. I wrote a story, for example, that dealt with the same series of events told from 5 different perspectives, and like each perspective was supposed to be stylistically different. But when I actually wrote it, I don't know if I had something in mind, but I don't know if I kept to that. But after I finished, it didn't matter
Right.
because it turned out the way I wanted it to. So whether I was faithful to each of the 5 stylistic tricks or devices that I intended to use, it didn't matter. So I know
Right.
what he means
Yeah.
by that, and I have to say it's influenced me greatly. Like I like having that kind of plan before I start, and then once you've created the mold, you just like pour yourself into that mold and break the mold. So
Right. Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
He's certainly
but
no, it does make sense. He's certainly a breaker and remaker of forms, isn't he? Right.
yeah,
Playing off of forms, subverting
form of
them,
forms.
creating new forms, etc. The other thing I'll say, you know, one could argue, again, putting on a little devil's advocate, anti-Joyce cap for a second, that, you could argue that the best works of literature, the ones that move us the most, it's where all literature is artifice, right? Everybody's using devices and tricks to get across whatever, whether it's verisimilitude or if it's emotional states or whatever you want to do, right? You're using these tricks. You could argue that the best work is where the artifice is invisible and it just all feels very natural, right? Whereas, a critic of Joyce would say with Joyce, the artifice is all too visible too
Artificial.
often.
Yeah.
Right, and that there's too much constructiveness, and that you can't get sort of enraptured and forget the artifice, right? The illusion that there is no artifice, because he's sometimes like rubbing the artifice in your face, right? Or whatnot. So there are valid critiques, of course, to Joyce, right? You and I obviously love what he does, and others do as well. But as I mentioned before, he's not for everyone.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. Well, any final thoughts on the Telemachia, which we have now completed? We finished the first 3 episodes. Stephen's section of the novel he doesn't disappear from the novel, of course, but his section, the part of the novel where he's the focus, we've now completed that.
Right. We have done so. And I would say, I wonder if you would agree that this time, doing it together after 28 years or whatnot, we're getting much deeper, aren't we? Right. And we're just sort of appreciating it on a stronger, more sort of rewarding level, I think. Right. Again, to beat a dead horse, like rereading is the whole point. Rejoicing in Joyce, right? Is spectacular.
Definitely. All right. Maybe we should leave it there. This has been Rejoice, episode 3. The Houston Joyce Society has been rereading James Joyce's Ulysses. So I guess this is a series of 18 podcasts. This is the 3rd. We still got a long way to go. Stick with us. You won't regret it, or maybe you will, but we're going to soldier on anyway. We're not going to punk out like some people do when they try to read Proust.
We're all in.
We're going to carry on.
All in.
Yeah, we're going to carry on to the bitter end. But we'll be back with episode 4 soon, maybe this week. We'll see how that goes. We might take a brief hiatus, but you'll hear from us soon. Thanks again, and farewell.